This is one of the most unfortunate and chilling stories you will hear, and it happened in Lagos, Nigeria, at Etashol Hotel and Suites, Ojodu Beggar. A 56-year-old woman named Mrs. Olusola Olusoga and a 39-year-old man, Mr. Tunji, were brutally beaten and strangled to death. Mrs. Olusola had been living peacefully in London for the past 30 years with her family before the tragic incident. She had spent most of her life in the UK, working hard to build a successful future. However, she had always wanted to have a business back home in Nigeria, so she started sending money to trusted individuals to oversee the construction of her dream business, a hotel. She had poured millions of naira into this business, believing that she was securing her future. But as time went on, she knew she couldn't just rely on others to manage it for her. So she made a big decision. She returned to Nigeria in 2018 to personally oversee her hotel's operations. Little did she know her return would mark the beginning of a deadly plot against her. Mrs. Olusola's return from the UK should have been a joyful one, but for some of the workers at her hotel, her presence was a problem. One of them, Mr. Vincent Jeffrey, the hotel supervisor, saw her as a walking ATM. To him, someone who just arrived from the UK should be loaded, giving out money freely. He expected that she would be throwing cash around, but Mrs. Olusola wasn't that type. She had worked too hard for her wealth to just squander it. That annoyed Vincent Jeffrey, and he decided to take matters into his own hands. On January 24, 2019, Vincent Jeffrey gathered 4 other men who worked at the hotel, 2 full-time staff, Henry Lawal and Okechukwu Light, 2 contract workers, Dubai and Dangote together. These 5 men sat down and planned the unthinkable, to rob and kill their own boss. Their plan was simple. Step 1, they needed to make sure no other staff would be awake to witness. They decided to prepare noodles, Indomie, and lace it with a sleeping drug known as SK. All the other workers, except Mr. Tunji, the hotel manager, were served the food. By midnight, all the staff had fallen into a deep sleep. Step 2, gain access to Mrs. Olusola's room. The only problem, the room keys were with the manager, Mr. Tunji, so the gang went to his office to get the keys. But there was one problem. They hadn't drugged him, so he was awake. A struggle broke out. The 5 men overpowered him, strangled him, and left him lifeless. But when they checked his body, the room key wasn't on him. Their plan was already falling apart. Determined to see it through, the gang proceeded to Mrs. Olusola's room. They broke into her room while she was peacefully sleeping, unaware of the horror that awaited her. The moment she saw 5 men storm into her room at 3 a.m., she was shocked. These were her own employees, people she trusted. Before she could react, they tied her up. Some sources say they beat her with sticks, while others say she was strangled to death. Either way, she didn't survive the attack. After killing her, they stole gold jewelry, cash, and valuables from her room. They thought they had won. But now they had a new problem. How would they escape? Escape gone wrong. They had stolen millions of naira worth of valuables. But there was one issue. There were security guards and police officers stationed outside the hotel. There was no way they could escape with all the stolen items without raising suspicion. So they had 2 choices: leave with the stolen items and risk getting caught, abandon everything and run for their lives. In the end, fear took over. They decided to run, leaving everything behind. By morning, they had all disappeared. The horrific discovery. That same morning, Mrs. Olusola's 12-year-old son woke up, preparing to go to school. Like every other day, he went to his mother. But what he found shattered his world. His mother was lifeless, dead in her own room. He screamed. His cries alerted the entire hotel. By now, the other staff who had been drugged were waking up, trying to process the nightmare that had unfolded. The police sealed off the crime scene and launched an investigation how the killers were caught. During police questioning, Mrs. Olusola's daughter, a singer known as Melissa Wizkid, dropped a shocking revelation. She revealed that all 5 suspects had already been fired from the hotel months before the murder. But if they were no longer employees, How did they get in? Was someone helping them from the inside? Was there a bigger conspiracy at play? That was when the police discovered the CCTV footage. The footage revealed everything, from how they drugged the staff to how they murdered Mrs. Olusola and Mr. Tunji. One by one, the police started hunting them down. The first arrest was Vincent Jeffrey, the mastermind. The police tracked him to his hideout in Port Harcourt and arrested him. Under interrogation, he confessed everything. He admitted that he orchestrated the attack and named the other 4 accomplices. Justice or incomplete justice. Vincent Jeffrey was sentenced to death by hanging. But here's the problem. The 4 other killers are still missing. Even though they planned and carried out the murder together, only one person has faced justice. The big question remains, why haven't the police caught the others? If they could track down Vincent Jeffrey, why haven't they tracked the rest? Could there be a cover-up? Did they escape the country? It's been 5 years since this case happened, yet the other 4 killers remain free. Final thoughts. Mrs. Olusola worked hard for 30 years to build a future for herself and her children. She trusted the wrong people, and in the end, they took everything from her. But is this true justice when 4 out of 5 killers are still out there? What do you think? Should the police reopen the case and track down the remaining suspects? Or do you believe something else is going on behind the scenes? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so more people can be aware of stories like this. Stay safe.